So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is AJ Ehrenstein. I'm one of the two deans of Beyond Barnard, and I'm really excited to be presenting a topic that I have really enjoyed presenting on many times throughout the last couple of years, both during the typical Summer Research Institute, throughout the academic year, in partnership with great student organizations like the Barnard Chemical Society. Shout out to y'all for giving us hype for today's events and the events that are taking place across STEM Careers Week as part of Summer Colloquium. And I'm excited to engage in a full week-long discussion with you all about what it means to explore diverse STEM careers, pursue them successfully. We'll talk to faculty, we'll talk to alumni, and on Wednesday, for those of you who are interested in learning more about technical interviews, which can be really challenging in specific ways, can be intimidating for some people in some specific ways, we'll have a couple of folks from Twitter join us to walk us through technical interviews, what you should know about them, how you can prepare for them, and how you can take advantage of the next couple of months. We'll go through the agenda for the entire week and for today in just a second. But again, just at the top of so many of these events, hope that you're staying well and safe. There's so much going on in the world, both in the news about COVID, about ongoing social protests, and we're just hoping that you're taking care of yourself, that you're using summer to take some time to rest, relax, recuperate, and engage in these important topics as you see fit. A reminder, you can always check in with Beyond Barnard at barnard.edu if you have questions about programming throughout the summer or if you just need our help on anything. So our topic for today is really a kind of whirlwind introduction to STEM careers. And here I'm really thinking mostly about STEM careers through the lens of some practical documents and activities that you can be doing throughout the summer. What do I mean by that? I mean resumes and CVs and cover letters and networking. And I'm going to try to introduce you to some of the best practices that I've developed over the last 10 years in concert with so many different colleagues and thousands upon thousands of students that I've advised over the course of my career so far. So we'll talk mainly about some of those practical questions today, and I'll lay out what the rest of this week will look like. But again, I want to use some of the conversation today about job documents and about networking to help structure a more kind of abstract reflection that you can be doing when you're thinking about what kind of career you want to pursue as a person who's interested in STEM. And just one more time as we get going, I've seen a few more people come in, which is great. I'm just going to share the sign-in sheet in the chat once more. Feel free to fill out your uni from there. So again, this week's events are all part of Summer Colloquium. If you haven't checked out other Colloquium events, I really encourage you to do so. Over the course of the summer, Beyond Barnard is planning upwards of 75 events and programs to help you stay engaged, to give you opportunities to reflect on your career and academic goals, and also just to connect with each other and with alumni. I'm sharing the Summer Colloquium homepage in the chat right now. Take a look at all of the events that are happening. There's really a ton, and our staff is really excited to continue to be plugged in with you all virtually this summer. So here's what we can expect this week. As you know already, we'll talk a little bit about an intro to STEM careers today for about an hour, and I'll lay out what today's agenda is in a second. Tomorrow, we'll structure our thinking specifically around graduate school. Graduate school means many different things to many different people, and I found in advising Barnard students, particularly in STEM fields, there's so many different options when it comes to graduate school, and it's important to think about the reasons that you want to attend graduate school. For those of you who may have been on the Structuring Your Summer in STEM presentation at the beginning of Summer Colloquium, you'll know that at Beyond Barnard, we've had a lot of conversations with students who are thinking about graduate school as a kind of refuge from perceived economic downturns, not just perceived, but real, over the course of the next year or two. And what I want to do tomorrow is drill a little bit deeper into all of the different options that graduate school presents to you and all of the reasons you might want to think more carefully about your professional and intellectual goals before you commit. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Wednesday, as I mentioned right at the top, we'll meet with a couple of folks at Twitter and have a conversation with them about approaching technical interviews. On Thursday, we'll be joined by some really great alumni. It's so much fun to be here at Barnard for about 2.5 years, and now some of the folks that I've advised are coming back and providing advice to students. And on Friday, we'll wrap it up with a faculty panel that focuses on Barnard faculty to provide some insights about how to approach advisors, to think about letters of recommendation, how you might structure conversations about your scientific aspirations with Barnard faculty. I wanted to put out some of the goals that I have for you all for this week. I don't think that everyone's going to have perfect attendance for these events. I don't think that you're all going to check off all of these boxes, but here are some of the things that I was hoping that we could get to across this week. If you're attending programs throughout this week, you should be able to, by Friday, research careers with some more context and some reflective structure. What I mean by that is thinking about how you react to all of the many things that you might do with STEM training. Definitely want you to be able to produce documents that will advance your objectives, taking advantage of some of the best practices we'll talk about today. You'll prepare for technical interviews if you're interested in those kinds of roles, those kinds of things with a little bit more confidence after our conversation with the folks at Twitter. We'll help you narrow the list of graduate programs, types of programs, and help you think about how to research institutions. I hope that you'll feel a little more confident connecting with alumni to help structure your search. We'll give you some idea about how to approach faculty and have productive conversations about your goals inside the classroom and out. And as always, I think like with dad jokes and flowery shirts, it's summer, guys. Even though it's starting to really pour here, I feel like it's gonna hail. If a cow flies by my window, I'll let you know. But we'll have a little fun. I don't know, we'll see. So here's for today. I think by the end of today, you're going to get a sense of some initial questions to guide your thinking about STEM careers. I think a lot of people approach the question of what a STEM career is in a little bit of a monolithic way. And I want to trouble the assumptions that we sometimes have about what constitutes a STEM career. I'm going to focus on a couple of really tactical, concrete steps for you to take. So if you leave this presentation with just 3 insights, I'll share those with you. You'll be able to write a resume, cover letter, and CV with a few more best practices from Beyond Barnard in mind. You'll be able to create or update your LinkedIn profile with some best practices that I share constantly with students and alumni. And I'm hoping that you'll have a better sense of how to access resources more generally at Beyond Barnard throughout the course of the next couple of weeks as you think about taking advantage of the remainder of the summer and head into the fall. I'm also interested in hearing what you're hoping to get out of this. So I want to try a poll, and we'll see if this actually ends up working. Bear with me one second. Here we go. I'm going to launch this poll, and let's see how this goes. Basically, I want to know what you're hoping to get out of this section. Whether it's practical tips on job documents, some new ways to think about careers in STEM. Maybe you're just feeling a little lost while you're remote and the people that you're living with or cohabitating with are driving you bananas. I know that's certainly sometimes the case for me. My wife is right next door though, so I can't say that too loudly. Ideas about how to translate scientific skills for multiple career fields. Maybe you want some direction on how to apply specifically to jobs or internships. Pictures of adorable dogs will be shared. I'm glad to see that that's performing really well. And if it's something else entirely, feel free to chat me. I'm really interested to hear all of the different things that folks are trying to get out of these events. And we'll do some of these informal polls throughout the week. And I'll share some of the results at the end of the sessions as a little treat for you guys having come here. But it really looks like most of you are aligned on just wanting practical tips on job documents, thinking about ideas on how to translate scientific skills and get some specific direction on applying to jobs and internships. And then others, networking. My gosh, I should have even put it in the descriptions, but certainly we'll be talking about networking and some basic tips to get started in helping you feel more confident in that. So that is great. I'm so excited about my technological prowess here. I'm going to share the results. My gosh, attendees are now viewing poll results. My God, you guys, I think that all of this is just so exciting to me that I can use Zoom like a mini pro so far. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Now, the first thing I want to ask you to think about in this conversation is what counts as a STEM career for you? I think very often when I advise students from STEM fields, they have a very rigid notion of what STEM work entails. Basically starting with research and thinking about research in a very specific and narrow way. And while it's certainly possible to think about a STEM career as a researcher, as a faculty member, certainly you're exposed to STEM folks in faculty roles all the time. One of my goals for you for today is to start thinking more broadly about what it means to leverage STEM skills in some often surprising ways. So in the legal profession, as a doctor, as a science librarian, as a development officer for a science foundation, as a biologist, of course, but maybe also as an accountant or as an educator in a museum. One of the best things that I think that students do when they first start really thinking about the many directions they can take their STEM education in is to broaden what might count as a science career. We'll talk a little bit more about this throughout our conversation this afternoon. But I want to encourage you to think that it's less about a job title and more about a job description. In other words, many of you are studying sciences as your undergraduate field at Barnard. Very few of you in the long term will go into that faculty, just like be a pure practicing scientist. And I think that's really liberating because it means that if you have commitments to science, you can take those commitments into many different fields. We'll talk more about this, but first again, I want to try one more poll to keep us going here. And I want to ask, what draws you to STEM work? So I want you to think about your connection to STEM fields and just kind of laid out a couple of things that for me are endemic in scientific research in the kinds of fields that you all are interested in. So research, quantitative reasoning, learning and using technical skills, communicating STEM and teaching, advocating on behalf of minoritized groups in STEM fields, discovery of new ways of thinking, finding solutions to problems, and thinking critically about how we're mobilizing evidence. You know, wow, thunder, I love it, it's so dramatic. But especially right now, there's so much pushback on notions of objectivity and empiricism, and you as scientists are really committed to these notions. What does it mean to bring those commitments into the workplace? So I'm gonna close the poll in just a moment. Some interesting results here from me. And I think that, yeah, I'm gonna end that there. I'm gonna share your results. And it looks like finding solutions to problems was the #1 result. And that's really interesting, right? Science is about using evidence, marshaling the scientific method to find solutions to problems. And problem solving is a key skill across industries, not just in the lab or the library or the classroom, but in many other fields. And I want to emphasize that it's definitely there as well. And we'll talk about faculty careers and research careers, but I also want to help us think more broadly about what a STEM career means. So thanks for participating in those polls and making me feel like I actually know how to use Zoom. I will totally be, I will be jazzed if I see some applause emojis in the Zoom, but I'm not going to force you guys to do any of that. Okay, so here's the rest of, thanks, you guys are really kind. For the rest of today's agenda, you missed a parenthetical there. Sorry, guys. Grammar is important to me. So I want to think first about resumes in a STEM context. I want to think about them as documents that empower you to translate some of the skills that you're developing in the classroom, the lab, your extracurriculars, and in some of your internship and externship experiences. There's often a lot of questions about the differences between resumes and CVs. There's some specific tactics that I want to talk about for STEM CVs in particular, but it's much more than just the fact that the CV is multiple pages and a resume is 1 page. And if you don't even know that yet, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it. We'll move into some cover letter best practices, and I've actually structured this around some cover letter not so great practices that I sometimes see from Barnard students and alumni specifically, and kind of unpack why we pursue some of these less effective modes of communication and try to get you to start thinking about the most effective way to translate yourself into prose. We will talk about networking and try to get you thinking about next steps towards networking. And we'll finish off, as always, with some questions. So just to start, resumes in a STEM context. First thing, STEM students are always worried that there's something like, a resume robot who's trying to screen you out for keywords. And I think that this fear is largely overblown. Humans still absolutely read resumes. And I think this is especially at the case for the kinds of organizations and firms that Barnard students apply to. Most importantly, humans still read resumes when you're making the right kinds of networking connections to establish a relationship before you even submit a resume. So it's still important to create a resume that a human is going to read. And I think it's also important to know that STEM students have very distinctive advantages and challenges when writing resumes. It's important to understand them, and that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in a second. Also, I think it's true that the robots will definitely destroy us all. They're definitely coming. Sorry, guys. Maybe some of you will design those robots. So the one thing I want you to take away from this section, and I said that I'll give you a couple of very key brief takeaways. If you think of nothing else when you leave this event today, I want you to know these things. The first thing is you should be editing your resume each time you apply to a new opportunity. This is especially the case, I think, for STEM students. Job descriptions for different kinds of software engineers can sometimes look very similar across firms. Different kinds of job descriptions for clinical researchers can sometimes look very similar across different hospital systems. It's very important that you still take the time to tailor each resume to each position that you're applying to. This demonstrates a kind of commitment to the organization that's important in helping you distinguish your document. That said, if anybody has faced this, you are not alone. This whole notion of facing a blank screen and a cursor, all you think is, uh-oh, I have to sit down and write a resume and I don't have any real experience. This is something that actually occurs to people at all levels of their career field, regardless of whether you're 18 and you're just finishing up your first year at Barnard, or you're a veteran in many STEM fields and looking to make a pivot in your 40s or 50s. This affects everyone. And I think the best way to combat it is to ask very specifically what strong STEM resumes can do and what they almost always can't do. I like to think of resumes as just one more genre of communication, a piece of argumentative writing like you're trained to write at Barnard from day one at the college, except you're using yourself as evidence to make the claim that you're trying to offer, which is essentially, I am a good fit for this position. So a good, strong resume will curate your skills, knowledge, and experience. It will make choices about what you're going to feature for the employer to make the best case about your fitness to the role. In other words, I see too many first drafts of resumes that are 7 and 10 pages long with everything that you've ever done since high school. It's really important to fashion a resume on the basis of curatorial choices about what is strongest about your experience, given the audience's expectations for what you're going to bring to the table. I think in the context of STEM scholars at Barnard specifically, I think a resume is a great place to make a strong argument about your quantitative and qualitative skills. So like the robot said, STEM students always bring distinct advantages and challenges to the process of applying to jobs. One of the skepticisms about STEM students is that you can communicate technically, but you have trouble with communication skills. But you know that at the heart of studying science in the Barnard context is the capacity to communicate about your work, to translate the value of scientific research and your knowledge that you're developing in classrooms in the lab from many different kinds of academic and professional audiences. A resume is a great place to show that you are the kind of scientist trained in a liberal arts environment and you have the capacity to use both sides of your brain. I think it's an important place to frame non-STEM experience as applicable to particular roles. You all are so engaged in extracurricular activities, in internships, in mentoring opportunities. Thinking about how to position those activities as important to your work as a scientist can be important no matter what kind of role you're applying to. A resume is a great place to translate your research for general readers. We'll talk a little bit about jargon in a second, but it's important to make sure that you are talking about the work that you're doing in a lab in language that is easily articulable, repeatable, and comprehensible to folks that you're actually applying to in many different kinds of jobs. They might not have any idea what polymerase, neutrino, quarky, I don't even know, I haven't taken science in a really long time, but you want to make sure that your resume is legible to a person who may not be expert in the subfield that you're applying to. This is even the case if you are applying to a research job in a subfield that might not be a perfect fit. Again, we'll talk about jargon in a second. The most important thing, though, is that a resume can only ever land you an interview. This is a great way to de-stress about what a resume actually is doing for you when you submit it. You cannot get a job with just a strong resume. You cannot get a job with a great resume if you miss the interview because you slept in and missed the appointment, right? A resume can only get you a ticket to the interview in the first place. It's not the only element in the way that firms and organizations will evaluate you. What can resumes almost never do? Well, one is hide an attention to detail. And I struggle about leaving this in for the STEM presentation, but because it doesn't feel specific to STEM, but you will be surprised how frequently I find grammatical, spelling, all kinds of errors on resumes. It's really important to have someone take an extra set of reads or edits on your resume. Have another set of eyes on it always. And we're happy to do that beyond Barnard all the time. You shouldn't be exaggerating or inflating your qualifications. Resumes can't do that in a convincing way no matter what. It always comes out. It always seems hollow. In the same respect, it can't capture everything that you've ever achieved since birth. You need to make the choice, and I think very specifically, once you're a sophomore at Barnard, almost everything from high school should start to fall away. I really think all of you who are rising sophomores as of this summer can start to peel things away from high school. You want to, again, capture the most recent, applicable, impressive descriptions of what you've been accomplishing in the course of your recent work. It's not going to convey expertise in the form of specialized terminology, and in many ways, sometimes you may turn people away from your resumes by emphasizing the amount of specialized jargon you're including in the resume. And last thing, like I said already, kind of in the inverse, is it's not going to land you a job, it will only land you an interview. How do we translate this into some tactical skills or things to think about when you start to sit down and write these things? Well, here's some top do's and don'ts. Number one was the big takeaway for the resume section of this talk. Tailor your resume to each position. Second is to quantify your experience wherever possible. And I think this is a strength that a lot of STEM students already bring to their resumes. Talking about the numbers can be something that you're naturally inclined to do with a STEM background, but think about frequencies, volumes, numbers of students you've taught, the frequency with which you were able to lead a group on a field trip. Think about numbers really broadly and use them as frequently as possible to give hiring managers a sense of scale for your all the things that you're doing. Many of you manage social media accounts. How many followers? How often did you post? Think broadly about quantification because it can really help you be specific about your experience. At Beyond Barnard, we really emphasize one-line bullets that utilize strong verbs to describe your experience. You want to demonstrate outcomes wherever possible. So it's not just that you conducted research on X thing. It may be presented or published or delivered or shared updates. You want to talk about the outcomes of your research. You want to show where the work is going, not just that the work has been ongoing. I think this happens is focusing on your specific contributions can be a challenge for STEM students at Barnard. I think unfortunately this is one of those instances where there's a little bit of gender bias going on as well. Women tend to emphasize the accomplishments of a team and not focus on the accomplishments that they contributed to that team. So we always have an eye out for resumes that don't do an adequate job of saying what you accomplished in the context of a collaborative team environment. That said, we totally know that science is by its very nature collaborative. It integrates multiple perspectives. What we want to emphasize though is what your role was in coordinating, collaborating, contributing to those collaborative outcomes. I think you can definitely draw from coursework as well. I see a lot of hesitance or a lot of anxiety about not having practical experience, but so much of what science students are doing in the lab and in the classroom is actually practical. Developing proficiencies with different hardware or software or languages, Python, R, SPSS, data. You're building this into some of the analysis that you're doing in the context of the classroom. And it's okay to draw from coursework to really show that you have those skills. And I think you should always invite feedback from us, from faculty, from folks outside of your discipline. I think this is really important for scientists. Someone, if you're a psychologist, someone from the field of physics should be able to read your resume and understand some idea of what you're trying to convey with each of your bullet points. If you're in physics, then you should definitely hand it to someone from biology and say, does this make sense? If you were just a reader trying to hire me for this development job, would you understand what it is that I did in the lab? So your top don'ts, Don't use Times New Roman, Calibri, or Arial. I call them the sweatpants of fonts. I make a big deal about this all the time. These are the generic fonts. I like Garamond. I like Railway if you're a Google Docs user. I just think pick something that's still clean and neat, but is not the default font for resumes. You shouldn't rely on technical jargon. I can't say it enough. Don't evaluate your own work with adjectives like exceptional or groundbreaking. There is an exception in science fields that is evaluative, but also has a very specific meaning in STEM fields, which is novel. If you're developing a novel protocol or a novel approach to a certain kind of body of knowledge, you can definitely use that in a science resume. That's totally fine. Underselling yourself is related to that exigency to be specific about your individual contributions to group work. Shouldn't force the reader to use an electron microscope, even though guys, the dad jokes are just throughout the presentation. I hope that's okay. But as scientists, you shouldn't force someone to use a microscope to read. It should be one page. And that's kind of the last takeaway is don't go on to that second page when it comes to a resume. There are specific reasons for that. You want to be respectful of people's time. You want to make sure that you can demonstrate that you care about the amount of effort it takes to understand who you are. But I think most importantly, by keeping it to one page, you're actually making an argument about your own ability to argue efficiently, to make a claim in a succinct and respectful manner. What does this end up looking like? We'll go through this really quickly. I just kind of want to give you a couple of our best practices. And again, in Handshake, I really recommend, we started uploading mock resumes, resumes that have been anonymized that we think are strong from the last couple of years. So I encourage you to go into the resources section of Handshake. I'm just gonna, I know that all of you know Handshake already, but I'm just linking it there. When you log in, click resources, and you'll find all sorts of resume guides and also some of the most recent resumes that we've anonymized. I also would really recommend, if you want a deeper dive into resumes or really any of the topics that I'm talking about today, we uploaded recently many presentations to our YouTube channel, which I just also put in the chat. So really quickly, what I like to see in a first draft of a resume when a student comes to me for advising, I like to see a simple heading that's not multiple lines, that doesn't take up a lot of space because you want to be efficient. I like to see education first. This is for students. If there are alumni on the call today, I think there's a point at which Barnard should start to move down and your kind of practical and very applicable experience should start to move up. But for those of you who are students, I don't like to bury the lead. Barnard is a great qualification to have on your resume, and I think it should come first. I also think that it can be really beneficial to list some selected STEM courses, or even to show the balance between the STEM courses and humanistic and social sciences courses that you're taking. Again, allaying the reader's potential skepticism that you might be a one-dimensional candidate as a scientist. You guys are all incredibly well-rounded intellectually, and it can be good to show that. One thing here, I don't like relevant courses. By putting relevant, you're implying that everything else that's not on the resume is irrelevant, and that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is use coursework as a conversation starter, as a means of helping the reader understand the kind of intellectual person you are. I think that thesis titles or topics can be really good here as well to demonstrate the depth of your research abilities, your experience, just to give some folks some interesting ideas of the things that you're working on. GPAs, they tend to be required for certain kinds of technical fields, but to be honest, there's more anxiety about GPAs than there needs to be. And we can always have a specific conversation about whether it should be there. This is typically a personal call unless it's really required. I've seen resumes for students who've gotten great jobs that never mention their GPA once. And then I've seen some firms that really require, a certain GPA cutoff. It is by far the minority, and we can talk about this some more. This is important for you all, I think. So use effective headings. I see too many education, professional experience, and then other. Using headings can help call out what you want the reader to notice in each section. So notice here I put STEM research and mentoring experience. Here, maybe this is an application document for an organization, it's a nonprofit that advances STEM for women. So it's important to really drive home that you have all of this research and mentoring experience. But for a different job, this might be nonprofit experience. It might be teaching experience. By using section breaks to your advantage, you can call the reader's attention to what you're hoping to emphasize below. It's much more specific then professional experience, which tend to be generic and may leave the reader just up to them about what they want to take away from a section. Here's one of the magic tricks I always like to share, right aligning dates. So I'm gonna pause the share here for a second, and I'm gonna move on to a different share. And this is one of the things I get to do on Zoom that I don't get to do typically, which is to show you how to save yourself some madness in the middle of the night. So I see so many people, can I get a thumbs up from a couple of people if you can see me tabbing around here? Okay, great, thank you. So Fancy Chemist here is up at 2 a.m. and they are struggling like crazy to get this resume done. And they want to get their dates aligned on the right-hand side. And they're going tab, 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 space, 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 December 2020 through present. Okay, we're going to go back and space, 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 space. I want you guys to get your sleep. I want you to go to bed. So what I want you to do is I want you to go up here if you're a Mac user. And there's similar functionalities for all kinds of word processing platforms. So this is a right tab stop. You're going to create it by dragging it into the ruler. You're going to hit tab once, and now the dates will be aligned. And the best thing is when you change the font size, it stays pasted to the right-hand margin. So hopefully that saves you 10 minutes of sleep. It's one of my favorite things to share because nobody's really great at Microsoft Word, and I feel like a magician every time I get to show it. I hope that was helpful. Back to the presentation. I want you to think about how you're going to frame service, and I think community service, leadership, community engagement can be really important for STEM jobs. Again, this is to hit off this notion that you're just a person who sits in a basement and codes, or you're just a person who goes and works in the lab by themselves. You want to use the many diverse experiences that you bring to show that you actually are engaged with each other on campus in extracurricular activities, or that you go to an internship. And that's not to say if you don't do those things that you're an ineffective candidate. What I want you to do is bring out the ways in which you're collaborating, you're communicating, you're working with each other in the lab. And that's kind of the STEM challenge, is trying to help communicate that you are a full person and not just this person who is single-mindedly and kind of blinders on, focused on one thing. I will say one thing here, for those of you who are applying to technical roles, for some types of roles, and these are very specifically kind of engineering, techie roles, technical skills should be brought up, sometimes just below the education section. And that's more of a computer science-y, more of a physics, quantitative heavy resume for very specific types of roles. If you have questions about that, I can certainly answer them. Let's look at this top section really quickly. I call this top section real estate. There are a couple of things that you can use in doing this top section to emphasize your experiences in a helpful way. So one is, I don't want you to bury Barnard College. I want you to put that right there. I don't want you to take too many lines to communicate that you are a comparative literature major like me. Maybe you have a minor in chemistry, unlike me. But I want you to just be efficient in the way that you communicate your degree. But also for those of you who may be studying abroad and therefore have language competency, I think you should put some of those experiences right in the top section. Languages get buried at the very bottom of the page. It can be really good to put Universidad de Sevilla right at the top so that people know you speak Spanish. I see a lot of kind of Flatiron or Girls Who Code institutes up here too. If you want to emphasize certain kinds of trainings that you completed in the course of your education at Barnard, outside of Barnard, you can totally put that in the top section. This is kind of my homework assignment for you for the resume section. You can go back to the presentation, which I'll send to you this evening, but I want you to think about some of the strong STEM verbs that you can use to describe your work. And then I want you to think about how you might translate that for a field that you're interested in. Nonprofits, tech, communications, maybe finance and banking or consulting, maybe something like museum work. How would you take some of the verbs that apply to the work you're doing in the classroom and in your extracurricular life and translate that for job descriptions in some of these other fields. Starting to use these verbs and understanding that they can actually be used, that teaching is not just teaching, but communicating. The teaching is not just communicating, but also leadership. That being in the lab is not just about researching, but it's also about collaborating and meeting and providing progress updates and reporting to faculty members. Getting a sense of how you can translate even one specific type of experience for many different types of audiences can really help to start the resume, to help you start to bring the resume to life. How are we doing so far? You okay? Here's an adorable dog wearing a medical mask improperly. Like, you guys, that dog is not going to prevent anyone from getting COVID. That is a improperly worn mask. But anyway, we can forgive it. Any questions? Anybody want to shout in the chat real quick? You can always use it, so it's there. Okay. When it comes to CVs, I think this is probably the most helpful way to put it for you all. Resumes are appropriate for most jobs and professional school applications. They stick to one page. They emphasize your experiences and skills in a way that matches you to the job. In that sense, it's not just the bullet points that should change, but you can also change the headings. You should be flexible in the way that you communicate what's in each of the sections that you use. And they should be updated and reviewed regularly. And I think that's true for both the resume and the CV. For a CV, the CV is most appropriate for a lot of master's programs and PhD program applications. They go multiple pages over multiple years, and they grow over time. So whereas you can be a 30-year professional and still have a one-page version of your resume, your CV will only grow with more experience. CVs emphasize what's important to academics, which is typically degrees, books, for scientists, articles, presentations, posters, and the like. Research, teaching, service to the university community. That's what's important to academics in a CV, and so a CV emphasizes those kinds of experiences most. In my experience, they have relatively inflexible headings, and I'll talk about what that means in a second, but mostly from CV to CV, the headings are consistent. And again, they should be reviewed and updated and proofread regularly. So the kinds of example sections for STEM CVs that I would recommend are the kinds of generic, straightforward, kind of drier, but I think in this context of CV, important headings. This is typically what I see on a STEM CV. So from education to publications, I see sometimes posters, research experience presentations, technical skills, affiliations can be professional organizations, lab skills I see called out a lot versus just technical skills. And then references. CVs still typically have references at the end of them. So this is some of the kind of format differences between resumes and CVs. I like to talk about what page one of a STEM CV looks like and notice some of the similarities and differences. So you'll see a lot of kind of templates for CVs online that say CV on the top of them, and that's just crazy. And then, headings that last 5 pages with like your fax number. Just because you have more space doesn't mean that you should just use it on information that can be communicated more efficiently. So you should have a similar heading to what's on top of your resume, be just as efficient. Education definitely comes first. This can really be the case all the way through your doctoral education. But I think for most of the folks who are putting a CV together in the early part of their career, education would come first. Like I said, simpler headings and starting with research can be really helpful for graduate applications. Notice that the dates are left aligned instead of right aligned. This is a matter of personal preference in a way that I set these documents off from one another, but CVs really are more about a narrative. So CV is actually like curriculum vitae, which means, the courses of your life. This is more of a kind of linear biography over time, and it can be helpful to have the dates right up front. And again, just because you're allowed to go onto more than one page doesn't mean that everyone is going to read more than one page. So I think it's really important on a CV to make a strong first page, or as I like to say, make page one strong enough that everyone wants to read the rest of it. Extracurricular work can still be valuable and can still find its way on the first page. I see a lot of it on page 2. and forward. And things that are on CVs that typically tend not to be on resumes as broken out sections, at least in the way that I conduct advising. Honors and awards are broken out much more specifically, listing each award by line. You wouldn't typically do that on a resume because it takes up too much space. That's an error, sorry about the education first there. I like calling out fellowships separately. You can, by the way, talk about fellowships that needed to be declined because of COVID. In a CV, you can always say you won the award but had to decline or cancel due to COVID. Same with presentations, projects, other things you might have been working on this summer. That's putting declined on a CV is appropriate, and I see it all of the time. Last thing, bottom page numbers with the date. The date can help people understand when the last time you updated the document was. It's also great to keep you sane so that you know when the last time you updated this very long and evolving document over time, when the last time you updated it was. Okay, into cover letters and some just brief basic best practices here. The one thing I want to leave you with on this one is read the job description and treat it like an essay prompt. So STEM job descriptions sometimes don't even require a cover letter, but if they are required, then you should go through that sucker with a highlighter and underline either on your tablet or, if you print it out and draw all over it. Make sure that you are attending to what the job description is asking. You're going to use those keywords not only in the resume, but also in the cover letter. So I'm going to give you, these are the common cover letter mistakes that I see from Barnard students. First is the letter isn't addressed to a person. There are exceptions here. It can be really hard to figure out who's the recruiter at a really big organization or firm. But sometimes the job description will say reports to X person. It might give a name, it might give the title. If it gives the title, then you can go to LinkedIn and look up the person who has that title at that company, or go to the organization website and look who has the title. You should focus on fitness to a position and not qualifications. So the qualifications are what the resume is all about, right? You have a list of all of your qualifications. The cover letter is a chance for you as a scientist, again, to show that you can translate those qualifications into an artful piece of prose that demonstrates why those qualifications fit to the position as described. Again, this is a chance to show off that you are the kind of scientist who can use writing to communicate an argument. Forgetting to say their name is what I've always called the Destiny's Child rule, although that reference is starting to get a little old. I will totally admit it. I am not of the TikTok generation, but say their name, say their name, say their name means don't forget to bring it back to the company or the organization. Make sure that they know that you're tailoring each letter to them, that you're speaking specifically to what they want out of candidates and who they are as an organization. This next one I see all of the time. I'm going to get so much out of this internship or experience. Barnard students really like to talk about the ways that a position will give them the opportunity to grow and to learn more. It'll give them the opportunity to develop skills. And this is great. Like, you all want more opportunities to learn and grow and develop. It's really important. The problem is that firms and organizations want to hire you for your contributions. They want to know that you have something to bring to the firm, to the organization. So it's important to say, sure, I could learn something, but let me tell you about what I'm going to bring as a science candidate from Barnard. I see a lot of this. I don't have exactly what you need, but I do have this. I promise you that no one pays attention to what you're saying after that but. So instead of saying, I don't have quite what you want, but I do have this thing instead, which is almost as good, we at Beyond Barnard tend to emphasize just say what you have and tell them how what you have is exactly what you need. I see this phrasing all the time. Although I don't have X, I have Y. And that I always take a blue pen and cross it right out. The last thing is cover letters are no place for belief and hope. So it's not, I believe I have a lot of skills. It's not, I hope to hear from you soon. It's, I have these skills and experience, and I look forward to talking to you soon. This has a way of conveying confidence in a way that these kind of wishy-washy words tend to soften your belief in the abilities that you're bringing to the cover letter. What does this look like? Again, same heading as on the resume, a date. I have shifted my thinking about this over the years. So in a moment of heightened pronoun awareness and a kind of sensitivity that's been really productive in the professional workplace, I find dear first name, last name is the best formal salutation to use when you can find the person that you're reaching out to. I find a generic kind of, this is the only kind of boring sentence that I would have in a cover letter, which is just call out what you're applying to right away. Then don't bury the lead. Who are you at Barnard College? Do you have the kind of academic background that they might be looking for? Are you just really qualified in terms of your academics because you went to Barnard? I find Barnard sometimes gets pushed all the way down the page and you want to call it out right away. Then I want you to move into describing what's exciting about the work of the organization. Show them that you've done some homework, that you know something about them, that something is interesting about what they do. If you've talked to an alumna at the organization, you can say it there. But again, this is a really good opportunity for you to say that you already know something about the firm or organization and you're excited about it. And the last is this solid contribution sentence. In the role, I would look forward to mobilizing the experience that comes with multiple summers spent conducting faculty-mentored science research, and would also bring skills in writing about science and advising undergraduates in STEM classes. This last sentence is your thesis statement. It's the argument that you're going to prove in the remainder of the document. And notice that it provides that argument, that thesis statement, in the language of what you will bring to the role. What follows? I think it's 2 paragraphs, and you basically, draw from the kinds of lessons that you may have learned in elementary school. Go back to your roots. So that means a point sentence or a topic sentence that provides a supporting claim for the main argument of the letter. You're a good fit for the role, and in this paragraph, you want to talk about that fitness in this particular way. Using supporting evidence, using examples from your experience is much better than listing out qualifications for roles. And so what you want to do is, instead of listing everything that you are bringing to the table, you want to talk about 1 or 2 examples of achieving something that they're looking for in each paragraph. And I think the final sentence of each of these 2 paragraphs should again return to say the organization's name and again remind them, this is the kind of experience that I would bring to Science for All. Just a couple of questions that came up here. So I don't know who will be reading the cover letter. How should I address these people? And I think that the best way to do that, if you really can't figure it out, you can say, dear members of the selection committee, or dear members of the search committee. You can definitely do like to whom it may concern. It's a little more traditional. I like to use dear members of the search committee because it suggests that there are multiple people involved in the selection process. This is basically a matter of personal preference, and I know that other members of the team have different ideas, but you can definitely be general. You shouldn't stay up all night trying to figure out who to address it to. Something relatively broad and referring to multiple people can be totally fine. And finally, in the sign-off, thanks for your consideration. I look forward to the opportunity to discuss my experience and the role at Science for All. So again, no hoping and praying, just thank you, and I'll look forward to the opportunity to talk about this more. It would be such an honor to work at this place. It might be, but you want to be confident and show that this is just for you. It's a job. It's something that you'd be excited to be a part of, but also you're applying to other places. Finally, sign it. You can download an app called Signature Plus. It's a really simple iPhone app. You just use your finger to write a signature. I know some of you have like pencils and tablets that I do not have, but it helps to personalize what is in many other respects a really impersonal document. So sign it. I also think sincerely is much better than warm regards or bests or all of my best or yours very truly. Just sincerely is professional and succinct. And here's a picture of corgis in a pool because they're awesome. And that's all. Okay, so very last thing, networking and next steps. So you've got some basic ideas about how to craft a resume. We've talked about how to translate some of your experience into cover letters using some of the best practices. And now I want to talk about what I think is really honestly the most important thing that you can be doing this summer while we're all kind of holed up and still living living virtually. But networking is the way that it's often described. I like to make it sound much more like building a community of support for yourself, or better, connecting with individuals who share your interests in STEM. Why? I think because networking gets a bad rap. It sounds like we're instrumentalizing relationships. And there's a different presentation on the YouTube channel. I really recommend you checking it out. It's called Rock Your LinkedIn Profile, and it's led by a couple of alumni who work at LinkedIn and who do a great job of talking about ways to structure your profile, but also just thinking about the ways that networking is really just building connections with people who share your interests. So I recommend you check that out at the YouTube channel. But I do want to just, your kind of last one takeaway here is fear not, kind of in general, especially now. It's very scary, but fear not generally, but also specifically when you are networking. The Barnard community, in my experience, have been at 4 institutions of higher education now in the last 15 years. This community is way more engaged. There's something in the water, there's something about this place. The number of folks who actually respond, who connect, who are willing to help out, engage, is really amazing. And you're part of a special community, and it's important that you know that and are less fearful, or work up the energy to be more confident in being able to hear back from people who really want to help you. It's no BS. It's a really special thing, and it's always amazing to me. Okay, but so enough about kind of the abstract. What do you need to do to get started? I don't think you need a ton to get started networking on LinkedIn. I think you need a profile picture with Millie here, the creepiest bear mascot in all of the land, dollar for dollar. You need a cover photo. So this is actually my cover photo. I work at Barnard. I like Barnard, so I have Millbank Hall. But I see a lot of skylines. I see a lot of hometown skylines. I see some folks in the lab. I see people like, you know, in full PPE in their clinical setting, or you know, something that says a little something about yourself. This is often wasted real estate, and I think it's an opportunity for you to be a little bit more personal. And then I think the last most important part is the summary. So your profile picture doesn't need to be too fancy. It can be someone who takes a picture with an iPhone, midriff up, professional dress, but doesn't have to overdo it. You can be wearing a blouse, very simple. The cover photo, which we described. And I think the summary, there are 3 important elements. One is to say right at the top, again, you're a STEM student at Barnard College. The second is to provide a little bit of context for the kinds of professional and co-curricular experiences that you have. And the third is this last part. Like, I'm always happy to connect with Barnard alumni. Reach me at, and then your email address. And this is a great way to show people that you're really excited to connect, that you're open to hearing from people, and that you're making it easy for them to do so. Okay, I'm gonna do one thing really quickly, and if you gotta go, I know you gotta go, but I hope you'll stick around for a few more seconds. So how do you really get started doing this? Bear with me. Oops. Okay. Can you see my LinkedIn at this point? Anybody give me can I get a thumbs up? Okay, great. So I think that one of the best ways for science students to start, if you're really just curious about the many different things that you can do with a science background at Barnard, what you want to do is start from the Barnard College school page. And so that's just linkedin.com/school/Barnard-college. From here, you can go to this alumni section. You'll see there's 21,000 alumni on the site. What they studied is on this next page here. Just pull this all out of the way. And you can add something like chemistry. And now what you'll see here is 300 alumni who have chemistry listed somewhere in their profile. This is a great place to get a sense of all of the diverse things that folks are doing, from the chemistry from the chemistry background. So everything from, I see PhD candidates, I see a chief of staff and a technology consultant, and a director of education and diversity with Annie Jiang here. I see all sorts of stuff. So this is a great place to start from your specific major. But another great way to start is to say, okay, I want to start with clinical research coordinator, which is a very common first position. If you search that with quotes, which will make sure that it's looking at the entire job title, and filter by people, you can then add a filter right here, scroll down to schools, and look up Barnard College. And when you click apply, you'll get Barnard alumni who have the title Clinical Research Coordinator somewhere in their profile. For those of you looking for clinical roles after college, this is really often biologists or neuroscience majors or psychology, but really any discipline in the STEM fields. This is a great place to start as well. So let's say you want to get started reaching out. So you find these people, you find all sorts of exciting places where they work, and you say, okay, well, now what? Now I know that they exist, but what do I do? Here's what I suggest. Instead of clicking message, which you won't be able to do at first because you don't have premium likely, and you don't need premium to get started, but click connect and then add a note. And now you'll have 300 characters to provide a brief introduction to yourself and your work. What do you say when you write that introduction? Well, just for the sake of time, I want to get back to the presentation and I'll show you an example. And this will be in the presentation, which I will share with you again this evening. But basically, you want to emphasize that you're a current student majoring in a STEM field, and then move very quickly into what's exciting or interesting about their experience. What advice could they potentially add for you? I think this is really important. Barnard students very often want to talk about all of the ways in which they're qualified to have a conversation. And the truth of the matter is you're qualified just by virtue of what you're doing and who you are right now. Focusing on making it easy for the alum to say yes by spelling out what it is that they can do to help you can be really helpful and make it even likelier that they'll respond. Once they accept your connection request, you will have their contact information in the contact information section of their profile. So what I always say is no matter whether they respond to the message or not, if they accept your connection request, you can immediately go into the contact info section of their profile, find their email, and send a follow-up to try to set up time to chat. Your goal in the beginning should just be to have some informal conversations about their career, their work, how they took their STEM background and translated it to the work that they're doing in business, in nonprofits, in government, in the arts, whatever. And try to understand, what the potential path might be from there. Another great way to do this is if you haven't already gotten a profile at Barnard Connect. I really highly recommend Barnard Connect. It's a great platform where it's essentially LinkedIn for Barnard students, where you can connect with individuals who have already said they want to connect with students for the purposes of mentors. I saw a quick question. I missed two. So keep asking questions, by the way, because we're at 5:03 and I'm on the downslope at this point. So, if you have to jet and go, take your dog for a walk. Oh my God, I wish I had a dog. Can you tell? But I do recommend for alumni and students both that you're always happy to connect with alumni from Barnard College. You can be more specific. If you really want to connect with particular kinds of people, you can say, I'm always excited to connect with Barnard alumni, particularly those that share my passion for identity and inclusion in STEM fields. If you want to be really specific like that and help audiences understand what you're looking for in a connection, that can be really helpful. I'm going to get to a couple of the other questions that are coming in because they're great and really helpful. Here's Samson, the PPE dog. Wait, so hang on. So Barnard Connect first, make sure you set up a profile there. In the next couple of weeks, and this is related to a couple of questions that came in about canceled internships and research opportunities, this Beyond Mentoring platform will launch. This is going to be a place where alumni can post short-term projects that you can apply to. There's a limited amount of funding that Barnard received from a generous donation from a parent. And you'll be able to add this to your resume, kind of add a couple of professional experiences, one per student. Unfortunately, I wish we could give 10 to everybody, but hopefully this will be a thriving little marketplace for Barnard students to meet with alumni, have a substantive engagement on a professional experience this summer. Okay, Samson again, thanks and questions. I'm gonna shout a couple of these out. So the first is, when applications give you a choice between resume and CV, which one should you send? I think if it's a choice, I think honestly it's a personal one. I like resumes and would probably in an advising situation tell you the same thing. Like, I think they can get a lot more done in less space, but it's really on you. If you want to emphasize some of the more kind of academic qualifications that you're bringing to the table, I think it's totally fine to upload a CV. I will just caution that sometimes firms do use these terms interchangeably, and they really do mean a one-page CV. Sometimes it's just a question of getting somebody at Beyond Barnard's eyes on the document to make sure that we're, giving you an honest assessment of what might be best. Another good question, can a CV still have relevant research experiences from high school? I think yes. I think a CV can hold high school experiences, especially, some Barnard students have opportunities to work. I'm thinking of one of my favorite advisees from a couple of years ago. She worked at U Chicago, and we kind of bonded over the fact that we were both there at the same time. And it was a great lab. It was a lab that had relevant experience for sure. And so we kept it on. And I think that can stay as long as you think it's going to be important or impactful. If you worked with a PI that has a relationship to the lab that you're applying to now, if that PI from that experience is going to write a letter of recommendation for you, you can absolutely keep that experience on there. These things are not necessarily dogma, right? There's a lot of flexibility. I do think for a resume that most high school experiences should start to come off its sophomore year, as I mentioned. I'm going to take one more here, and please keep in mind before everybody jets for the door here, but I hope that you will all be in touch with Beyond Barnard over the course of the summer. Our advisors are here. They're working a ton. We're all trying to support you all as much as possible in virtual advising, and the events will continue to unfold over the course of the next few weeks. And I do hope you'll be here this entire week. Please keep your eyes open for reminders about the STEM specific events. And we added one. I hope you'll note that there are a couple of people who might be interested in the fact that there's the C's 4+1 info session is on Wednesday, immediately following our session with our friends at Twitter. Otherwise, thanks to those of you who have to leave, I've got two more here. How should we share portfolios in Githubs? For example, if you're a CS major, can it be helpful to have a website that shares projects? And I think absolutely. I think putting your GitHub link right in the heading, sometimes in place of a cell phone number, nobody's going to call you on your cell phone. And if they are, it's probably to offer you the job. And by that point, they'll just ask you for a phone number. But I think that using a GitHub or putting your LinkedIn address at the top, some people have started adding projects to LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn can actually serve as a one-stop shop for technical projects you might be working on. I think that's totally acceptable to share it there. I'm a big fan of GitHub. I'm a big fan of getting it onto the resume because I do think folks use them in tandem. And the last one here is for dates on resumes. What's the rule about gaps in timeline? For example, if you didn't work in the lab for 3 months, does that need to be reflected in the dates? I think yes. I mean, I think just to be, no one's going to say, oh, that 3-month gap was a big problem. I mean, also this relates to the summer of COVID, right? No one's going to ask what happened during the summer of 2020 and why you took a 3-month break from the lab that you've been engaged in the last 5 years. Dates, especially I think early in one's career, no one is kind of there with a fine-tooth comb trying to say, well, she wasn't in a lab for 50 days here and that's a problem. I think always err on the side of caution, and just be honest and forthright. And if there's a problem with formatting, we could figure that out. If you want to say summers 2016 to 2020, that's fine, for example. Or academic years 2017, 18, and 19, that's totally acceptable. Dates don't have to be December 2019 through September 2020. It can certainly be like AY 2017, 18, and 19. Lots of ways we can do it. I am going to fill up my water, and then I'm going to hope it stops raining and go on this run that I would love to go on, but not get struck by lightning. This was fun. Thank you all for coming. I want to leave one more time. I'm just going to put the link to the sign-in sheet once more. I hate to be a pain in the neck, but it's extremely helpful if you can dump the, you know what, I can't even find it. So I'll send it in the follow-up email. But thanks, you've been great. Thanks for the thumbs ups. It's been fun to engage a little more on Zoom than usual. If you have questions afterwards, give me a shout. We're here all week. I will talk to you all soon. Stay safe, stay well. Bye.